Hello, everybody. My name is Josh, and I'm going to teach you a little bit about Photoshop today and get you started on it. So what is Photoshop? So I went to photoshop.com to their webpage, and that's a place that you could go and kind of explore as well, because it does tell you a few things, what you can do. And of course, if you don't have it yet, it tells you how you can get a free trial and the cost and that kind of stuff if you want. So what can you do in Photoshop? It says you can turn photos into fantastic works of art. So that's one thing that's a little bit important about Photoshop is it really works with photos very nicely. You can also do other types of artwork as well, and you can combine photos with other types of artwork. So one thing you can do is create composites. So you can combine photos, artwork elements, and text and all kinds of different things. That's not even the full list of stuff you can combine, but you can put it all together in Photoshop to make your own interesting and unique designs. It says you can do artwork. So you can use brushes, pens, markers, pencils, and all kinds of different tools that look like real tools, like pencils and brushes, and you can draw out things, whether it's text or drawings or that kinds of things. You can do all that sort of stuff. It also mentions you can fine tune your photos. So you can take photos like this and you can edit them and crop and make them look better. You can retouch, repair, erase things out of it that you don't want, or even add things. So you can do a lot of fun stuff. Another fun thing to know about too is if you have access to an iPad, they actually have Photoshop on the iPad. Has lots of good features and can do a whole lot of things that you could do on your desktop as well. So these are lots of things you can do, and I encourage you to explore their website because they do have some tutorials and some fun things to check out here. But you might also wonder, okay, I have the basic idea. What can I do in Photoshop? But how can you really spur on your creativity and think about what are all the different types of amazing things that you could do? So there's a website that Adobe hosts called Behance, and it's called behance.net. And if you have a Creative Cloud login, you can actually log into this and have your own page where you can post your own work and follow people and keep track of artists and all that kind of thing. But they actually have a Photoshop page. And if you go to behance.net/galleries/Photoshop with a capital P, you can go straight to this. And so there's different artists here and you can check out their work. So in fact, if you click on that artist, you can see all the different types of work that they have done. You could follow them. You can, I believe if you go into the individual projects, you can leave comments and all that kind of stuff and see the work. So this is a children's book illustrator and she uses Photoshop for this. So going back, Behance is a great way to see all different kinds of Photoshop projects. You'll see people combining photos and doing illustrations and using brushes and just combining all those different things, cartoons, cool text, and lots of fun stuff. So this is a good place to kind of explore to kind of help generate your own ideas. Now, one thing I found, which I thought would be a great thing to teach first, is how to make pixel art. And I'll include this link in the post here, but Adobe created this page about how to make pixel art. So if you look at old style video games from perhaps the 80s and 90s, our screens didn't have as many pixels. So pixels are little dots of color that make up your TV or your computer monitor or your screens. And so basically, and you can see it a little bit better here, pixel art or anything that you draw or design in Photoshop is actually made up of all these little dots. And so earlier, like I said, back in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have our screens didn't have as many dots. So what would happen is that our designs would be, they kind of be a little bit boxy looking. You can see the squares and you can actually see each dot. But now artists have gone back and tried to create art using this style of putting dots together that looks pretty fun. So you may not realize this, but a photograph, think of a picture that you just take with a camera, that's actually made up of thousands of little dots. So I'll prove it to you. So let me jump over to Photoshop real quick for the first time. And I've already opened up a picture of a flower. So very cool, right? It's a nice colorful photo. You don't really see any dots. It's not like that other page where we saw the blocks from the design. But if I click on the zoom tool right here and click a few times and zoom in, you'll see the closer and closer I get, you'll start to see those little pixels and those little dots. And the closer and closer we go, you can see that this photo is made up of it's nothing but a bunch of dots arranged in a grid. Now each dot has its own color, and when you combine all these, it creates the photo. And we can even see this if there's a panel called the navigator, where you can zoom in and out, and you can kind of go back and forth if you want to see. In this little red box here, you can kind of drag around. So you can zoom in and see all those individual dots. So you can see that there's thousands and thousands of pixels that make up this design. So that's what Photoshop does. Basically, everything you design in here is made up of all these different pixels and dots. When you combine them in fun and creative ways, you create drawings. So how can we make some pixel art? Let's get started and let's do something in Photoshop that would be fun. And you can experiment and try to create some art that looks a little bit like this. So let's go back to Photoshop. Once you have this open, one thing you might want to do is, actually you don't really need to if you're opening it for the first time, but there's different workspaces. If you go to Window and Workspace, there's different types of workspaces showing basically how your panels are arranged. And you might experiment with different ones, but you probably will be on Essentials, and that's a good one to start with. You might also have a different box pop up when you open it for the first time. It's kind of like a welcome box. And I don't have that, I'm already have it open, but you can also go to File and New to start a new file. And here, your welcome box will look pretty much like this. So in the new dialog box, you have a lot of different options for what size you want. And you'll see over here, our dimensions are done in pixels. So that's, again, how many of those little dots that you have in a grid. And so you can type how many pixels you want your image to be. Now there's a bunch of other things you don't need to worry about here quite as much. The main thing we want to worry about is the size. Now you might also notice there's different tabs up here where there's kind of sizes that people have already thought up of things you can use. So the size of a TV screen, for instance, is HD TV. Or if you go on photo, here are some common photo sizes, and there's some different presets. Or a print. We all know what a standard piece of paper size, that comes out of a printer looks like. That's actually 8.5 by 11 inches. And so that's a preset that you can choose if you want to make it the size of a piece of paper. You can just choose that. But let me go back to, I'm going to just type in what I want it to be. And we're going to start with a very small document size, just so we can see all the pixels and play around with it. And as you get better, you might make these a little bit bigger. But I'm going to actually type in 50. And I'm going to type in 50 here. And this other stuff is okay. I don't have to worry about it. And I'm going to hit create. Now this might look very small on your screen to start. So you might want to go over to this zoom tool. All of your tools are over here on the left. Click on this zoom tool and click on this a few times and you can zoom in close. Or we did look at that navigator panel before. You can pull that panel up and you can zoom in and out with that if you like that better. Also, if you want to zoom out, up in here is your option. So whatever tool that you have selected, along the top you will have different options for that tool. So if I have my zoom tool selected and I choose the minus, that's going to zoom back out. Or if I do the plus, it's going to zoom in. So I want to be able to draw pixels and dots and to create some art like what we had looked at before. So probably the easiest way to do that starting out is there is a brush tool, but the pencil tool actually makes it a little easier to draw the dots. One thing the brush does by default is you see how it's kind of soft around the outside? Now you might like that effect, and you probably will later as you do more and more, but I'm gonna hit, I have a Mac, so to undo, I'm gonna hit Command and Z. You can also go to Edit, Undo, and you can see what that shortcut is that I did. Now, if you're on a PC, instead of Command, it'll be Control. You'll see a button on your keyboard that says CTRL probably, or it might spell out Control, and Z, and if you hit those together, you can actually undo whatever it is that you just did. So I'm gonna hit Command Z on my Mac, and I'm gonna undo that. So again, that edges of that brush was very soft. Now notice, I'm gonna go to the pencil tool instead. Now to get that, you have to click on your brush, and you'll see that there's a few different tools that are kind of hidden under there. I'm gonna go to pencil so that I have that. So you know this is probably the right thing, because notice it looks like a little square. So now when I click, it's gonna make a single dot that is a pixel. Now you'll notice sometimes, like I clicked like right here, and it didn't quite show up where I clicked, because there's a grid here and it's kind of invisible. And so we can actually pull that up. So to get that grid, I'm gonna go so that we can see it. I'm gonna hit View, Show, and Grid. And where is it? Oh, it's kind of hard to see. All right, sorry about that. I just don't use grids myself that often. So here's what we can do actually. So the problem is our grid lines are these light white kind of colors, so I can't actually see them because all of this is white. So this is a good time for me to show you what another tool is, and we can make a different background color. So there's something called a paint bucket tool. That's right. We have the paint bucket tool, and that is under this kind of what's called the gradient tool. If we click the paint bucket tool and you click, so you may have noticed that these dots are green. Also, you may have, you probably had black and white when you started, and you might have been painting in black or even white and not even seeing it. I didn't mention how to change the color. So to change the color of your pencil that you're drawing, click on this little chip right here. We call it color chip on the top one. That sets the foreground color. You click that, and then you can drag in here to get kind of along the rainbow basically, and you can choose the color that you want to pick. And then hit OK, and you see that it changed here. And so now if you use your pencil, for instance, it's gonna do those colors. But back to the paint bucket here, if you underneath the gradient tool, you choose the paint bucket. You can click anywhere in this whole area, and it's going to fill everything that you see. And notice it didn't fill these because those were already set to a different color, but I can just click those. And so I have a blue background, and now because I could see all my grid lines because the grid lines are white and my background is blue. So now I can take my pencil and I can change this color to something else, maybe like a yellow or something like that. And now if I want to draw like very carefully along and put certain pixels right where I want them, I can do that. And I can actually see those grid lines. So, and then you can fill this in. And so I'm making basically like a little arrow right here, which is kind of fun. So that's being very particular. Like I can even keep going, and maybe I want to put an arrow inside of a box or something like that. And you can do that. So I'm being pretty careful. Now also, remember what you can do, undo, if you would like, undo. You can change colors, and you can use different colors all together. So I'll change to like a red. Maybe I'll make the tips of this arrow different colors. So I'm being very careful about how I'm drawing. Now you might try a different way, as you might just try to draw. So let's draw a smiley face. So notice this is very square and very accurate. Now this is a little bit more freehand, you might say. Now if you do happen to have a tablet that you have access to, this will be a little bit easier because you can Now, I'm not talking about an iPad or something, but like a tablet, like a Cintiq or a Wacom kind of tablet where you can draw, and it's a little more natural, I think. Now, let's see, what else can I show you here? So we can change the color, we can draw. Now, if you do have a shape and you would like to fill it, you can go back to that paint bucket tool and click inside of there, and it's going to fill. It's almost like, you know how coloring, you have to stay within the lines? It kind of fills everything inside of the lines for you. So notice all this blue, all this same color. If we wanted to make that a different color, we can change it and use the paint bucket inside of there, and it's going to fill that whole area there. And if you don't like something that you did, remember you can always undo. Now there is an eraser tool. You might be tempted to use it. When we start using things like the eraser and the other brushes, you have to look at the options up here to pick what kind of size you want that to be. So I'm going to make it have a hard edge. So I'm going to make it 100%. I'm going to make it a pretty small eraser. You could even do it pixel by pixel, but I'll make it a 5, if I can get it, 5 pixel. And so you'll notice when I'm erasing, it's erasing it back to this white background color that I have on this underneath chip there. And so that's not looking too good, but that's erasing there. So one thing you might want to do, and we'll talk more about layers in the future, but there's a panel over here called layers. This is a way that you can separate what is on top of something else. And you can, let's say that we want this whole background. We just want a background layer that's all blue. So let me, let's do this. Let's start a new file and we'll start fresh. So so this is kind of that welcome screen that I talked about that you see before. So I'm going to create new. I'm going to do 50 by 50 again. That remembered what I did last time. So I can hit create. I'm going to use my navigator panel, and you can go window navigator if you don't see it. I can zoom in close. And notice I have this layer called background. So let's decide what our background color is going to be. Let's do something like a sky color maybe. We'll pick kind of, we'll get a nice kind of light blue. And we'll use our paint bucket tool and we'll click, and now we have a nice blue background. Now, if you don't want to see those grid lines, you can always go back and go to View, Show, and uncheck this thing that says Grid, and those should go away. I guess we're gonna, pixel grid, that's what I'm looking for there. That's what we were looking at. I'm not sure what this other grid is. Don't even see anything when that comes up. So anyways, we can go view, and if we want to see those pixels or not, we can see them, but it does kind of show you them by default. So what we want to do with layers. So let's say that we want to draw, but we don't want to mess up our background layer at all. We want to just keep that blue. We're going to just want to draw on top of it. Like imagine that you had almost like a stack of clear pieces of paper, and one of them you painted blue on it, and you want that to be blue, and then you have another layer of it on top, and you want to paint something else on there that is separate. There's a little plus button down here that creates a new layer, and it tells you that when you roll over it, it says create new layer. So you hit that plus and see it says layer 1. So now you can click on what layer that you want to draw on. So we've already decided that we want our background to be blue, so we can leave that alone and click on layer 1. I'm going to choose a color to draw with. I'll just do a darker blue, and I'm going to choose a pencil so that I can draw some pixel art. And let's draw a smiley face again, and I'm just going to kind of do a freehand. And I'm drawing in blue. Now remember, you can do undo. I can maybe have his tongue sticking out or something. We're drawing in blue, and notice that it's in this its own layer now. And you can actually, if you hit this little eyeball, you can even turn it off and on, or even off and on the background. But what's nice about doing it on a separate layer is if we grab this eraser tool again and erase, you'll actually see that it's not messing with the background, it's just erasing what is on that layer. Now, if I did choose the background and did erase, let's see, let's change my background color back to white. That's what the default is. And I'm erasing. See how it's erasing my background back to this default background color, white down here. So I'm going to undo that. You can go edit, undo. Or remember, you could hit Command Z on a Mac or Control Z on a PC. And I might even, I erased some of my smiley face that I liked as well. So I'm going to undo. And you can hit undo as many times as you need to go back if you need to. So there we have a nice smiley face, and it's there. Another thing which is cool about layers is there's a tool up here called the Move tool. And if you click that and you have the right layer selected, if you click on the image, you can actually just move it around and put it where you want. So that's another good reason to do layers, is because maybe I have a different head and a different layer and I want to move that around, but not move the other head. So this allows you, now notice if I click and drag inside of here, that didn't really work. You got to make sure that you're touching one of the pixels somewhere so that it knows what to grab. Also, actually, you may not have this as a default. Usually when you start the program for the first time, this auto select isn't selected. And so in that case, it doesn't matter where you click because it'll just grab and move that layer. Now, if you happen to have auto select, what it does is it tries to pick what you click on as to what you move. So, but you should have that unchecked by default. So if you have the move tool, and you can click anywhere and you can move that around. All right, so I hope what I would challenge you to do is try to make some pixel art. See what you can do. You know, after you draw it, zoom out and see if it looks better. You might zoom in, see what kind of stuff you could do. Pretend you're making an old video game perhaps, and that you have to make a little character that has to run around or something like that. This is a good chance to try your hand at some pixel art and see what you can create. So I hope you have fun and enjoy your first work with Photoshop if it's the first time, or if you're just learning something new. Have a good time with it.